live to Dr. Jamal Wakim, Professor of International Relations at the Lebanese University in Beirut. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, Egypt says the strikes have been coordinated with the Libyan authorities. Well, how difficult is it to coordinate anything with Libya, which is so divided?
Well, I believe that the situation in Libya has been chaotic since the ousting of Colonel Gaddafi almost 6 years ago. So, Egypt has been conducting airstrikes into certain strongholds of terrorist groups in eastern Libya mainly. But it didn't have any support or any cover from the international community. A few years ago, when ISIS executed 25 Coptics who were working in Libya, Egypt called for international cooperation against ISIS in Libya. However, there were reservations from the West, and I believe that this proves that the West, and mainly the United States, is just letting go of chaos in Libya because it would affect negatively the Egyptian national security and make Egypt vulnerable and incapable of leading independent policies in the region. And we know very well that since the 1970s, Egypt has been a main cornerstone of American influence in the region since Sadat shifted his allegiance from the Soviet Union to the United States. Regarding the strikes that occurred, or the attacks that occurred in Egypt, I believe that they come in, usually they come whenever, yes.
Sorry, do carry on.
I believe that they occur whenever Egypt tries to defy the American or the Saudi will. We saw, for example, that President Sisi, during the summit in Riyadh a few days ago, he had his reservations on pinpointing Iran as the main source of terrorism in the region, and that he said in his speech that these terrorist groups are not mainly rogue elements that are acting on their own, but they are supported, financed, and trained by states. And he was giving allusion to mainly Turkey and Qatar. But this didn't please the Saudis, who wanted to concentrate their attention on Iran mainly, because they wanted to drive the Americans into conflict with Iran, especially in Syria and Iraq. And there was also another attempt in Lebanon that, but we were lucky in Lebanon that the police was able to fail the attempt. But it was also directed against Christian groups in the city of Ras Al-Bak. And also the Lebanese government had reservations on the declaration during the summit of Riyadh, pinpointing, for example, Iran and Hezbollah. So that's why I believe that these attacks are not random attacks, but they are directed at the national security of states who go and who try to defy the will of mainly the United States and Saudi Arabia.
Well, going forward, I mean, how effective do you think cooperating with the Libyan government can be in the fight against terrorism?
Well, first of all, we need to differentiate between the region controlled by Colonel Haftar, for example, and the region, Western Libya, that is controlled by a so-called government, which is mainly controlled by Islamists. I don't believe that this cooperation with the Libyan government controlled by Islamists would lead anywhere, especially that it works along the lines set by the Western powers. And so far we didn't see any cooperation or any support by Western powers to Egypt in its fight of terrorists in Libya. So that's why I don't believe it would lead anywhere. And at the same time, damaging the Egyptian national security falls in the best interest of the United States to keep Egypt under control. For example, at one point we saw that Egypt tried to get close to Russia. However, due to targeting its national security and due to the attacks by terrorists, we see that Egypt got submerged by its own problems and could no longer have or act freely on regional matters. So I don't believe that terrorism is random. I believe that terrorism has always been used as a tool in the hands of the United States and its allies, whether in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Central Asia, in the Middle East, and elsewhere in the world. And this goes on. I believe that this trend continues with the United States. They are using this terrorism efficiently against their enemies, and they are targeting their national security. I believe that the only states that are really fighting terrorism are the anti-American states like Russia, Iran, China, and the likes of the members of Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the BRICS countries.
Well, let's look at the situation on the ground. I mean, the power vacuum that you've alluded to there in Libya has made it a safe haven for terrorism. Is it possible to eradicate it completely there?
I believe that it's possible to eradicate terrorism if this terrorism could no longer be sponsored by states, because these terrorist groups, they need training, they need financing, they need states to facilitate their mobility, their movements. So, and by the way, Turkey played a role in this at one point. The United States, of course, the West was a safe haven for these groups for too long, for decades. So, and there are a lot of reports in the West by Western media talking about sponsoring of these terrorist groups by the West during, for example, the rebellion against Muammar al-Gaddafi. NATO was bombing Gaddafi while these terrorist groups were attacking him. So I believe that we need to face reality. Reality says that the United States and its allies have been sponsoring these groups as a tool to wage a war by proxy against Russia, China, Iran, and other states to undermine their national security. That's why, for example, China became involved in the Middle East for the first time in its history, because there were elements from the Uyghur people in Western China who were radicalized by preachers from Saudi Arabia, who were used by Turkey to go and fight, whether in Syria, Iraq, or to wage attacks in Libya, or even in Egypt. And this is why, for example, Chinese government became very much concerned about this development. So, and this is in the media, it's no secret. I'm not saying any secret in this sense. So I believe that we need to admit the truth that it's mainly the United States, Saudi Arabia, and their allies who are sponsoring terrorism.
Well, going forward then, which countries in the region or outside of it are under threat of possible terror attacks from Libya going forward?
Well, I believe that other than Egypt, Algeria could be subject to such attacks, because I believe that Algeria has been a cornerstone of politics in the western part of the Arab world, and it was supportive to anti-Saudi policies for the past 5 decades. So that's why if Algeria, for example, goes against certain policies of Saudi Arabia, it could be targeted by terrorist attacks.
Well, just one final question, Dr. Wakim, if I may. The wider community would think of Egypt as a Muslim-majority country. Is it all unusual, then, for the Egyptian president to take such an extreme action in support of Coptic Christians, who are a minority in Egypt, probably, was it 10 to 20%? Do you think it's unusual?
Well, I believe that we need to understand the history of Egypt. Other than being the biggest, let's say, Arab country in terms of population, but Egypt is also the biggest Christian country in the East Mediterranean, because it has over 12 million Christians, and there was never sectarian clash in Egypt throughout its history. So we need to understand this. In addition, Egypt not only has a Sunni Islamic tradition, but it also has a Shia Islamic tradition. It was the first Shia state during the Fatimids before being replaced by the Ayyubids. So it's the history of Egypt is very diversified, it's very rich, and we need to understand the complexity. So when, for example, terrorist groups attack the Copts, they are attacking an integral part of the Egyptian population, and this is not presented in terms of majority and minority, because the Copts has been always there. They form, by the way, the majority of Muslims in Egypt now were Coptics at one point, and they converted to Islam in a peaceful manner for socioeconomic reasons. So this is the reality. We need to admit this, and we cannot understand the history of Egypt from an Orientalist perspective, presenting the history of the Middle East as a history of clash of religions, sects, and confessions. We need to understand it from a non-Eurocentric perspective.
Indeed. Thank you very much for that comprehensive view. Dr. Jamal Wakim, Professor of International Relations at the Lebanese University in Beirut, thank you once again.